Churches that do a good job of addressing young adults do it through what I call lifestyle evangelism, a way of living in a world that is so contrary to young adults' experience in a death-dealing culture that they can't help but pay attention because resurrection is happening in some place other than a video game. Drew Dyson was one of my doctoral students, and I'm learning from his research. He studied United Methodist churches that do a very effective way of addressing young adults. He says they have a missional ecclesiology, and what a missional ecclesiology means, and we'll talk more about this afternoon, is that they have high expectations of being like Christ in 3 ways. These churches first have high expectations for meaning, okay? They deal with the purpose questions. This is in contrast to our culture of persistent trivialization. Remember, video games invite players into a story of epic meaning. Saving the world is at stake in a video game, and no matter what level of player you are, when you enter in, you have a part to play in helping to save that world. Churches with high expectations for meaning wrestle with questions like, why am I here? Why does this matter? Does God matter? Do I matter? Servanthood is huge. Service and outreach and being part of the community cannot be underestimated because this is part of what it looks like for them to take this world that they have and turn it upside down. This upside down hermeneutic is something that gets lived out in the act of serving others. It's an epic win, and so it takes anxiety off the plate. Second, these churches have high expectations of belonging, not just attending, belonging. Remember, video games like World of Warcraft have all of these collaborators that are out there to help you in your quest to save the world. They've got 500 million people ready to help you at any given time, and everybody has a load-bearing role. Churches are just happy if young people show up. We don't want to burden you with expectations. It's the kind of thing that led Jon Stewart from The Daily Show, get ready for this, to say this: the United Methodist Church is the University of Phoenix of religions. Wow. Now that barb was not directed at the University of Phoenix. That's directed at us. And what he meant was that it's his impression that the United Methodist Church, and Jon Stewart is Jewish, and this is one of the prime places young adults actually get their news from this comedy show on TV. He's under the impression that we don't want to inconvenience people by actually following Jesus. We don't want to have a gospel that'll make us feel uncomfortable. There's nothing upside down about us. We had better listen to this. I spoke to Maria Dixon last week, who is doing some research at SMU about United Methodist young adults who have left the faith. And one of the kids told her this: well, the church was easy to break up with. Easy to break up with. Belonging requires churches to invite young adults to participate in resurrection and not just consume it. We have to make young people agents of mission and not just objects of it. We have to give them load-bearing roles in the faith community where it matters if I show up and where somebody notices if I'm gone. That's what it means to belong. The third thing Dyson found out was that these churches have high expectations of hospitality. In fact, he called it radical hospitality. Now remember, video culture is famous for the way it accepts marginalized young people. No wonder studies show that gamers feel better about themselves online than they do in real life. They have better relationships. They have more relationships. They feel better accepted. They have people who actually appreciate the gifts they have to bring. You see, when young people can't find meaning, belonging, or radical hospitality in the church, they invent secular ecclesiologies instead. The Green Movement is a secular eschatology. It's about looking forward to the end of things, right? Social entrepreneurship is a secular form of mission. But young people with an idea to change the world don't come to the church. They go work for Tom's Shoes. Celebrity culture is a form of secular worship. They will invent a church of their own that is secular if we do not become the church we have been called to be. So let me close with just one example of kind of an accidental way of showing what this upside-down hermeneutic might look like to a bunch of young adults. If this had been a church, I would have said this was an example of lifestyle evangelism, but it wasn't a church. Should have been. Instead, it was a group of young adults who came together to bring life into a death-dealing situation. You might have read about it. It's a true story. 2007, Knoxville, Tennessee, there was a white supremacist neo-Nazi rally. In fact, it was more aimed at, it was more anti-Jewish than anything else. Here's how the day started. You had soldiers, you had people on the sidelines that were sympathizers with the neo-Nazis. It did not look good. But then, something else showed up. They called themselves, get ready for this, go ahead to the next slide, the Ku Klux Klowns. They showed up as God's grace with skin on and a whole lot of props and costumes. You see, they knew that the last place that this rally had taken place, there had been a lot of violence. And they decided that they would diffuse the hostility with humor. Their strategy was not elegant. What happened was every time the supremacists would yell, "white power," the clowns would turn that into something silly. So the first time they heard white power, the clowns said, "Oh, white flower." And they threw flour up into the air, you know. And then the next time it was white flowers. And then pretty soon they heard white power and they said, "Oh, I know, tight showers." And you can see. And then the next time, this is my favorite one, they heard white power. They said, "Oh, I get it, wife power." Okay, well, who got the press that day? It wasn't the neo-Nazis. They packed up and went home. It was God's grace with skin on, because listen, if God can't use the church to bring grace into the world, and by the way, this is the children's book where you will read this story. David Lamott turned it into a children's story. If God cannot use the church to bring game-changing grace into the world, to bring the kind of grace that shows what it looks like to live upside down from the culture, God will use any opening God can find. Now, this afternoon and tomorrow morning, we're going to talk more about what adults can do to pass faith on to young people, even if they're nuns. But right now, I just want to leave you with a crazy, upside-down idea. What if becoming a younger church does not require us to have more youth? What if it requires us to have more hope? Theologian Jürgen Moltmann argues that what makes youth young isn't their age. What makes youth young, he thinks, is their wide open sense of possibility. Their confidence that death is not on the horizon, that the future is unbounded, that the future is filled with unlimited potential. And what we say when kids are so hurt that they can't see that kind of hope, we say, "Oh, they're old before their time." For Christians, this sense of wide open possibility, this confidence that death is not on the horizon, this conviction that the future is a gift, that is God's gift to us in Jesus Christ for all Christians and not just for young people. In other words, Christians have a different definition of what it means to be young than the general culture. Everyone whose future is bound to Jesus Christ is young, regardless of age. Because in Jesus Christ, we are people unfettered by death. We're apostles of possibility. We are participants in God's future, in the kingdom of God, world without end, not just someday, but now. In Moltmann's words, I love this quote. Moltmann says, "It's not that the future belongs to the young. The future makes us young." He tells the story of Pope John Paul II, who in 2002 was very ill. He was ailing, but he goes to his hometown in Krakow, Poland. And you may know that Pope John Paul II started out as a youth pastor. And so the kids in his hometown greet him and dance with him, and they start shouting, "You are young, you are young." And because he's old and he's hurt, and he's like, no, it's not true. But then they cited this: "Youth shall faint and be weary, and young men shall fall exhausted. But they who wait upon the Lord shall renew their strength. They shall mount up with wings like eagles. They shall run and not be weary. They shall walk and not faint." What if the church became known for our urgent optimism, for our tight social fabric, for our blissful productivity, and for our epic meaning? What if we lived as though God had given us an epic win in Jesus Christ? As though we had permission to live from God's side of the clock? What if we are a young church not because of our age, but because of our hope? Let's at least start there. Thank you.